What's been happening at Maitland Local Court this week? It's the week starting the 18th of November 2024. Can we, members of the public, find out what happened in the courtroom without going to court? According to the court lists, there are about 170 people with cases here at Maitland this week. There are no stories about these cases in the newspapers, no police media releases about them, and I can't find anything on the internet. So unless we went and listened from the gallery this week, we, the public, have no information in the public domain to tell us about these cases. Did the court follow the law when dealing with these cases? What about general deterrence? Well, that requires us to know about stuff that happens inside the courthouse. So that's it for this week. However, I may have listened to some cases this week. So I got an understanding of what some of the cases were about, and therefore what cases the public could have heard about this week. How did the court deal with a guy who was involved in a police pursuit that lasted 25 kilometres? There was more than one Section 14 application being dealt with. That's where they're seeking a diversion away from conviction and into treatment for mental health. The magistrate declined both applications, and it's important to follow the law here. So what were the reasons? What about the guy that did a U-turn and ended up disqualified from driving for 6 months? And then there's a lady who was caught shoplifting, who was actually present, which was helpful because they also were able to sort out the 5 counts of failing to appear at court. The most educational case was the bodybuilder case. Why? Because we got to hear about the 5 different performance-enhancing drugs, which when mixed together results in bulging muscles. They were using the street names of these drugs like Trend and Decantalo. I've no idea what they were talking about. And I think maybe the magistrate learnt more about bulging muscles than he thought he would on that day. Moving on. So how does the court deal with women who fight in public? Because there was more than one woman charged with a fray, and they were unrelated fights. By the way, in the next case, which was a common assault matter, where the guy chased the victim and then got on top of him on the ground and then continued punching and kicking, was a bit nasty. One defendant turned out to be 17 years old, therefore considered a child, so I won't be discussing that one at all. It was being dealt with in an open court. The law requires you to be very careful talking about cases that involve children, so I just choose not to talk about it. Did you know the guy who was involved in a random altercation on a train earlier in the year is now allowed to catch the train again? A couple of the defendants this week appeared on multiple days. The court finalised the release application from the day before because they'd worked out how this defendant was going to be released from Parkley Jail and travel to Yamba. There was also some progression in the case about the guy who assaulted someone by throwing a pot plant through a window. He actually appeared in person only to be taken back to jail in the afternoon. But why was he brought back to court from jail the next day? What was the young man who assaulted his father in their home sentenced to? What happened to the woman who was not paying attention while driving on the F3? It's called the Pacific Motorway, but I still call it the F3. What about the case where the magistrate said, what happens in Queensland happens in Queensland? This is a New South Wales local court. A guy seeking bail was refused because the magistrate found that there was no change in circumstances since the last bail application. There were fresh custodies this week. Was bail granted in the fresh custody case that involved a family law situation? There was another release application, also from the day before, where the defendant who came in from jail via video was still showing injuries from the altercation. How did the court deal with a guy who had not completed community service? I think there were cases in Maitland Local Court this week that the public would benefit from knowing about. But the public would have had to sit in the gallery if they wanted to know about the cases because there are no media stories about them this week. So my question is, do we need more journalists in New South Wales?